Greetings. My name is Jimmy Dale. I'm the pastor of Mountain Nelson Missionary Baptist Church in Eureka, North Carolina. I'm sharing some personal meditations on the Sermon on the Mount. This particular passage, Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4, Jesus is talking about the sincere practice of faith. And he says to his disciples, to this crowd, which included his disciples, "Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you in the synagogues and in the streets as the hypocrites do, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly." Now, as I said, this paragraph has the same pattern as some three following paragraphs when he's talking about the sincere practice of prayer and the sincere practice of fasting. In each of these, there is a tendency, we have to recognize that we often have a tendency to be insincere in our practice of faith. And I think this is reflected in the lives of some of our young people that have turned away or turning away from the practice of religion today, at least established religion, because they're searching for sincerity. They're searching for real, genuine faith. And unfortunately, what many of them are seeing in some of our traditions and some of our established traditions is a insincere practice of faith. I often wonder what would happen to our churches today if we were to lose our tax-exempt status. And I think a lot of pastors would agree that they suspect that at least some of the giving would drop. And it's just amazing that not just in churches, but in a lot of the nonprofit groups, a lot of the giving is based on the appearances. That's why you see, you go by these large universities and you see people's name on the outside of the building, because pride is often a motivation for giving. And here Jesus talks about the problem that poses within with sincere practice of faith. It facilitates insincerity. And so, and I think a lot of people are, especially young people, pick up on that insincerity and they reject that. A lot of people reject that. And that's why some people are turning away from the practice of established traditional faith because they sense the insincerity. Well, Jesus is talking about that. And he's highlighting this problem, the insincerity of our faith and how empty it is and how devoid of meeting with God it is. And so he gives us a pattern for how to be sincere in our practice of faith and to not do it to be seen by men, to be pleasing to men. And that's really not just a problem with giving or offerings or the doing of things. It's a problem everywhere, and it's one of the things that says in the book of Acts that the apostles were not doing the things that they were doing in an effort to please men, but they preached the gospel the way that they did to please God, and makes a huge difference in our practice of faith when we are very clear about what our intentions are and why we're doing what we're doing. Why we give what we do give. We do these things because we want to glorify God. We want to please God. And that makes all the difference in the world. And as he says here in this little paragraph, God blesses the sincere practice of faith. And folks, I think if we would strive to do that in our lives, practice our faith sincerely to please God and not worrying about pleasing our fellow man. But see, this is a contrast because in the same Sermon on the Mount, he says in the early part of the Sermon on the Mount, he says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." So what's the difference here? Let people know what you're doing, or don't let them know what you're doing. Talking about here, not letting your left hand know what your right hand is doing. I think what we have to do is compare the two paragraphs here in the intent in each situation. On the one hand, he says that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. And this paragraph that we're talking about today, the intent is to be seen by men, and that we may receive glory from men. And so that's a huge difference between the two. And that's what makes the difference in our practice of faith. Are we doing this to look good before our peers? Or are we doing this to be pleasing to God? And that makes all the difference in the world. Two people can give the same offering in the same setting, but have two very different results. One is pleasing to God, one is pleasing to men. And what we need to do in order to have a true, vibrant faith is to make sure we do what we do to be pleasing to God and not to men. And so, anyway, just a small part of this paragraph here, or the Sermon on the Mount. I find it to be challenging in so many ways. I would love, can you imagine what it must have been like to be there on the side of that mount when Jesus is really mocking the practice of the Pharisees? Can you imagine that? Jesus' humor really comes out in the Sermon on the Mount. I hope that you are challenged and enjoy the Sermon on the Mount as much as I have been challenged by it. I hope to see you here at church soon.